Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about 3 very scary yet true horror stories. I own a small house on a vast property in rural New York, which I visit several times a year, particularly during the winter months when it's perfect for skiing. The neighbors in this quiet corner of the world are a peculiar bunch, and there's one in particular who caught my attention. This neighbor, whom I'd never spoken to, lived just beyond the fence that separates our yards. On the other sides of my house, endless woods stretched out into the distance. I knew of another neighbor further down the road, across the street, with whom I'd had some friendly encounters during our mutual skiing escapades. But the mysterious neighbor next door was an enigma. My most recent journey to my winter haven was in January, marking the first visit of the season. As I walked up to the front door, the laughter of a child reached my ears, originating from the direction of the neighbor's house. The laughter struck me as odd, as I had never known them to have children. Nonetheless, I proceeded into my home, ready to embark on another season of skiing adventures. The first night in the house was always a bit eerie. I had to carry out the routine tasks of turning on the water and heating, reminding me that the house lay dormant for most of the year. However, that night, I slept like a baby, exhausted from the 4-hour drive from Connecticut. The following morning, I prepared to go skiing with my friends after a hearty breakfast and changing into my ski gear. As I ventured outside, I noticed a big red ball sitting innocently in the snow on my front lawn. Strangely, it hadn't been there the day before. I assumed it must belong to the neighbors, so I grabbed the ball and tossed it over the fence separating our properties. After an enjoyable day on the slopes with my friends, I returned home to darkness. Having already had dinner with my friends at the ski lodge, I was ready for a good night's sleep. However, as I approached the front door, I noticed that the red ball had reappeared on my front lawn. I found this odd, but I chose to dismiss it and repeated the routine of tossing it back over the fence. Inexplicably, that night I was awakened by the laughter of a child. It was around 2 or 3 a.m., and I couldn't comprehend why a child would be playing outside in the middle of the night. Curiosity compelled me to investigate. Peering out of my window, I saw no children, but the laughter had abruptly ceased. Instead, I noticed something peculiar on my front lawn. The same red ball I had thrown over the fence earlier. Chills ran down my spine as I retrieved the ball from its familiar spot. Unnerved by these occurrences, I decided to keep the red ball inside my house this time, rather than throwing it over the fence. I settled down for another night's sleep, hoping to avoid any further disturbances. The following morning, I mustered the courage to visit my mysterious neighbor's house and introduce myself. To my surprise, I was greeted by an elderly man who seemed entirely innocent. I inquired about the child's laughter and the persistent reappearance of the red ball on my lawn. His answer sent shivers down my spine. He claimed there were no children in the vicinity. I thanked the elderly man, shook his hand, and returned to my house, leaving the red ball in my living room. The following day, after another day of skiing with my friends, I was utterly exhausted and ready to head home the next day. I threw my skiing gear on the couch, crashed into bed, and fell asleep physically drained. To my astonishment, I was awakened by the sound of a child's laughter once again. I sprang out of bed and rushed to the window, where I spotted the red ball sitting in the snow on my front lawn. Panicked, I frantically searched for the ball, but it had vanished from my living room. I couldn't ignore the feeling of being watched, even in my own home. Fearing for my safety, I turned on every light in the house and meticulously packed my wet skiing gear into a bag. Ensuring that all doors and windows were securely locked, I left the lights on in the hope that they would deter any intruders. As I gazed out of my window, I spotted a child standing stiffly in the cold snow. The child was staring intently toward my window, and a shiver ran down my spine. I immediately closed the blinds, shutting out the unsettling sight. I struggled to find solace in sleep as fear continued to linger, and exhaustion seemed far out of reach. The following morning, I skipped breakfast and hastily packed my car, eager to put distance between myself and these inexplicable events. I drove away from my small house, leaving the enigmatic red ball and the eerie laughter behind. This unsettling experience left me bewildered, unsure of how and why these strange occurrences had transpired. The most chilling part of the entire ordeal was the sight of a child standing outside my window, in the cold snow, in the dead of night. The presence of that red ball was an enigma in itself, raising questions that may never find answers, forever haunting me. Nestled in the rural part of New York, I own a small house on a vast property, a haven I frequent during the winter for skiing trips. My quiet life was shaken when inexplicable occurrences began, involving a mysterious red ball, eerie laughter, and the unsettling presence of a child. Join me in unraveling this chilling tale of unexplained events and growing fear. As I made my seasonal journey to the snowy retreat, my serene and isolated house, surrounded by woods for miles, was my sanctuary for winter escapes. The season's first night was uneventful, and I embraced a well-deserved slumber after a tiresome drive. However, my peace was about to be disrupted by a series of inexplicable events. The story commences with me embarking on my seasonal journey to the snowy retreat. The first night, which was uneventful, eventually led to me embracing a well-deserved slumber after a tiresome drive. However, my peace was about to be disrupted by a series of inexplicable events. The story commences with my arrival at my seasonal winter retreat in rural New York. As I stepped into the house for the first time of the season, the solitude and emptiness weighed on me. I had to go through the routine of turning on the water and heating, and I knew it was going to be a strange first night. The story takes an eerie turn when an inexplicable series of events unfolds. It begins with an unassuming red ball that mysteriously appears in the snow on my front lawn. I'm puzzled by its origin and assume it belongs to the neighbors. I toss it back over the fence, hoping that's the end of it. But little do I know, it's just the beginning. As I navigate the bizarre appearance of the red ball, an unsettling sound shatters the silence of the night, a child's eerie laughter. Startled and perplexed, I jump out of bed, attempting to locate the source of the laughter. Alone in the house, I can't fathom where the sound is coming from, and my unease deepens. The eerie turn of events reaches its peak when, in the dead of night, I'm awakened by the sound of a child's laughter. Alone in the house, the laughter is perplexing and out of place, its origins shrouded in darkness. Unable to identify the source, I watch as the chilling laughter subsides, leaving me paralyzed with fear. My sense of unease escalates as I awake to more laughter in the dead of night. This time it's paired with an inexplicable dread that someone else is present in my home. Panic sets in as the laughter ceases, but the presence remains, lurking in the shadows. Tensions rise as I frantically search for the red ball, which has inexplicably vanished from my living room. With every light in the house switched on, I prepare to defend myself. I lock doors and windows, still bewildered by the inexplicable intrusions. I watch in fear as I catch a glimpse of a child standing stiffly outside, staring in my direction. The presence intensifies my fear, leaving me anxious and vulnerable. Overcoming exhaustion and fear, I attempt to sleep despite the ominous presence. It's a long and restless night as my terror battles with fatigue. Eerie hours pass before I finally drift off to sleep, the memory of the red ball haunting my dreams. Morning light brings a sense of relief and determination. I skip breakfast, pack my car, and drive away from the enigmatic red ball and its chilling mysteries. Leaving the eerie presence behind, I can't shake the feeling that the child's laughter will haunt me forever. The story closes with a lingering sense of unease and uncertainty. I can't fathom how the child's laughter and the red ball's inexplicable appearances are connected, nor how an unknown presence infiltrated my sanctuary. This chilling tale of unsettling occurrences serves as a reminder of how the unexplained can turn an idyllic winter retreat into a nightmarish ordeal, leaving me to wonder about the mysteries that linger beyond the veil of understanding. In a quiet neighborhood, my roommate George and I had our lives disrupted by the arrival of a new neighbor. Our peaceful routine turned into a nightmarish ordeal as we delved deeper into the mysterious character who had moved in next door. The first signs of something amiss came just days after the new neighbor's arrival. We decided to extend a friendly gesture and introduce ourselves, only to be met with eerie silence. It wasn't long before we realized that this neighbor was far from ordinary. One evening, while we were walking back from work, we noticed something strange. As we approached our neighbor's house, we saw the blinds twitching. It was clear that someone was watching us, a disconcerting experience to say the least. Despite this unsettling encounter, we decided to give our new neighbor the benefit of the doubt. However, things took an even darker turn when the bizarre behavior continued. Our neighbor seemed to have an odd fixation with late-night outdoor activities. One night, in the dead of night, I was awakened by strange noises. Curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked out the window. I was taken aback to see our neighbor, hooded and shrouded in darkness, sawing a large piece of wood in his backyard, an activity far from ordinary for the time and temperature. That, however, was just the beginning. A few nights later, the situation escalated dramatically. Blood-curdling screams echoed from the direction of our neighbor's house. The commotion roused both George and me from our slumber. We looked out of our window and saw our neighbor darting into his home. We were on edge, but we stayed put, not wanting to confront the clearly disturbed individual next door. His actions grew increasingly sinister and unpredictable, and we realized it was time to involve the authorities. George immediately dialed 911, recounting the ongoing nightmare to the operator. But before the police could arrive, we heard a loud crash coming from downstairs. Panic set in, as the man had somehow entered our home. Without a secure lock on George's door, we resorted to barricading ourselves against the intruder, not knowing what he was capable of. The man outside continued to pound on the door, rattling it violently. We feared for our safety, unable to predict his next move. Our prayers were answered when the police arrived, their commanding voices echoing through the house. The intruder dropped his weapon and was apprehended. But the story didn't end there. As the police searched our neighbor's home, they discovered a horrifying secret. In the basement, they found a distraught woman who had been locked away and, more chillingly, a lifeless body concealed in the yard. The woman, now in safety, could only offer a fragmented narrative of her traumatic ordeal. Though we never learned the full story behind the woman's captivity or the identity of the deceased, one thing was clear: the man next door was headed for a lengthy prison sentence. With the criminal removed from the neighborhood, the house next door was put up for rent again, leaving us to hope that a more ordinary neighbor would soon take his place, bringing an end to our harrowing ordeal.